Financial Wednesdays with About Detroit. Today we have the pleasure of having Professor X, Matthew Rowling. He's going to give us some insight on um,
building wealth.
building wealth and getting rich slowly through the stock market. So making sure that you're doing the right way. So he's also an adjunct finance professor at the Mike Ilitch School of Business. And he has his own YouTube channel that he can give you a link to, Personal Finance with Professor X on YouTube. So we're ready when you are. Let's get ready to start learning.
Thanks. Thanks for having me, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. As Tony mentioned, I teach personal finance at Wayne State, and I also work in innovation and entrepreneurship there as well. And so, real estate is the home ownership is one of the single biggest drivers of net worth for most Americans, and for the majority of Americans. So I have a lot of respect and appreciate what all of you do for a living, and hope I can leave you better than I found you with a little financial education today. This whole post was kind of a response to the GameStop. I'm sure a lot of you heard there was this big a couple weeks back, this kind of David versus Goliath story where these share prices were just bouncing all over the place for a old brick and mortar video game seller called GameStop. And so I went on Facebook and I said, I put together Matt's guidelines for getting rich slowly. A lot of people look at the stock market and you see fortunes being made or lost, and that's really exciting, right? And it's a random payout. There's nothing gets human being. All of you sell real estate for a living. Nothing motivates a human being more like a random payout, right? But the sad part of that is that for every story like GameStop, where you have individuals that are overnight millionaires, most people end up losing money in the stock market if they're only focused on the short term and they're just focused on speculating. And by the way, anytime you want to ask a question, just you can drop it in the chat, or you can just unmute and speak up and interrupt me, and we'll kind of go through it. But I always start my presentations with this slide. It was a tweet from a few years ago. I'm glad school taught me the Pythagorean theorem instead of how to do my taxes. It's come in really handy this Pythagorean theorem season. I love this joke. We go our whole lives, some of us all the way through college and more, and they never really do a good job of teaching us about our money, even though I'd say our health and our money are two of the most important things in our life. I just think it's a good path to start on. As a reminder, this presentation is for entertainment purposes only, and so all of you are ultimately responsible for your own financial decisions. So, if things go sideways for you, please don't sue me. You shouldn't. So today, here's the agenda. I'm going to walk you through the process of really just getting into the stock market. I think especially for a lot of you that are working, you're all in a way small business owners, right? You're working for Tony's brokerage, and you're there probably isn't a 401k, right, or something like that. And so it's important for you to access the stock market to build wealth. So we're going to show you how to open up a brokerage account and how to fund it, and how to come up with a asset allocation strategy, and talk about some stocks or bonds to buy, and how to build it, how to kind of keep it out of sight, out of mind, so you don't mess with it too much, and also we'll talk a little bit about the psychology of the market and your accounts, and then because it's such a hot topic, I'm going to talk a little bit about cryptocurrency, and then how to recognize a stock market bubble, or when the stock market's cold. And so, step one is really simple. Once upon a time, back in the 80s and 90s, you used to have to pay, upwards of $50 to $75 every time you wanted to trade a stock. But in the last 30 years, technology has really improved, and I wonder if I can just go through the process of maybe making a TD Ameritrade. I don't have a TD Ameritrade account, but I'll kind of just walk you through, you know, the process of maybe they'll open an account. So all of the brokerage accounts have similar service, you know, and pricing. A lot of these way, you know, so if you here you can open up a traditional individual retirement account or a Roth individual retirement account. Or an individual, you know, this is probably just the one you might start with, unless you were doing this for retirement purposes, which, you know, we can talk about offline, right? And so, you know, they're going to ask you for your social and your name, and I'm not going to type in all this information, but, you know, they're just going to ask you some questions, to some personal information, some financial information, and then you sign the agreements and the accounts up and running, right? And so it's the point being, it's a pretty easy process. I do have, you know, I'm not a big fan of Robinhood or Webull. There's a couple reasons that I would really encourage you to kind of avoid them. And Robinhood and Webull are free. And whenever we hear free, you know, you always have to remember that if the product is free, that means you're the product. And so Robinhood got in a lot of hot water with the GameStop debacle a few weeks back, because one of the ways that Robinhood would make money is that they would sell their order flow, which essentially meant that they would go to these large Wall Street hedge funds, and, you know, they would take all of your stock orders and sell that information about what individual investors were buying, and that was how they made a lot of their money. And they wouldn't necessarily give you the best execution for your trades. They might sit on your trades for a while and you know, kind of pinch a penny when the price went up or down to try and make a buck as well. That's not even my biggest beef with Robinhood. You know, my biggest beef with Robinhood is that it makes it fun to buy and sell stock a lot. And psychologically, like economically, that's really problematic, because if you're getting all these, you know, if it looks like a slot machine, you're turning over your portfolio a lot, you're paying a lot of money in taxes, right? You're probably selling low and buying high. You're probably selling the shares when you're scared and buying the shares when you're greedy, which is the wrong time to be doing it. And anytime a portfolio is churning, you know, you're less likely to be in the stocks for a long period of time and to experience the upside. So I just don't like the apps, those kind of free tech phone apps for trading. So the process to open up the account is pretty straightforward. I'll push pause for a minute and let anyone chime in with any questions you might have.
So like, for example, I go through Northwestern Mutual for life insurance, so I can do the same thing with them too, as far as opening up an account and everything.
You know, I don't know if NML has a trading platform. I don't think they do. So you might have to open up. No, they have advisors. I don't know if they have a trading platform or a brokerage account. You can ask if you have a relationship with the insurance person at NML. You can definitely ask them, but I don't think they do. You might still have to open up one of these like E-Trade, Scottrade, Ameritrade accounts right here. So, but they're all pretty similar. But that's a good question.
Thank you.
Okay. So, you know, step 2 is you link your bank account to the brokerage account, and you seed it with an initial amount, right? $100, $500, $1,000, whatever, you know, you feel comfortable investing, right? And so I think for real estate agents, something that I'd like to share with you, and maybe some of you have experienced this, is that our brains are really wired to treat windfall cash differently than money we've earned. And so, for instance, like if you work hard and you earn $100, you are less likely to spend it frivolously than if you found a $100 bill on the street. But the ironic thing about that is that in both cases, it's $100 in your possession, and you really shouldn't treat them, you shouldn't, from a logical perspective, it doesn't make sense to treat the $100 bill you found in the street differently than the one you had to work hard for, right? But that's kind of how we view it. And with real estate, if you have 2 or 3 closings in 1 month, and then you go a month or two and you only have 1 or 2 closings or what have you, sometimes you might psychologically view those windfall months as money that you can kind of be more frivolous with, which I think is it's any business where you have like uneven ups and downs in your income or how you get paid, that can be an issue. So more of a interesting money psychology point than anything else. So fund the account with an amount you feel comfortable with, whatever that is. Most of these accounts have no minimum, right? So you can put in $100 or $100,000 or whatever you can tolerate, right? And then this is kind of the oldest approach in the book to buying, to kind of balancing a portfolio. And so you have you have kind of stocks and bonds. And a stock is just a little piece of imaginary paper that is, much like Tony, she has her brokerage firm, and it's probably an S corp or LLC, and she owns 100% of the stock, or maybe she doesn't, I don't know. But when you have these public companies like General Motors or Apple or Google or Tesla, the share of stock, they have millions and millions and millions of shares, and each one of the shares is just a tiny imaginary piece of paper that entitles you to a fractional ownership stake in that company, right? In the assets and the profits of that business. And then the other side of that coin is a bond, right? Which is basically an IOU. It's debt that companies issue and that investors can buy. And so when I buy a bond from, a bond could be issued by the city of Detroit. It could be issued by the US federal government. It could be issued by GM, Google, Apple, Tesla, et cetera, right? And that bond is just entitling me to a series of those interest payments that entity is making, right? And so stocks traditionally are much more volatile, and they grow a lot more than bonds do. Bonds are much more conservative and stable, and they don't really go up or down. They just give you income and kind of protect your balance. And so the approach that I kind of share, and this is an old one, is you take the number 100 and you subtract your age. And so in this example, if you're 100 years old, I'm sorry, if you're 30 years old, right, you subtract that from 100 and you get 70, right? And so your portfolio would be 70% stock and 30% bonds. And the whole intention behind this approach is that over time, as you get older and older, and you are slowly shifting the mix of the portfolio away from stocks and towards bonds, then when you're older and you're getting closer and closer to retirement, your portfolio is less at the mercy of the short-term spikes in the market, right? So when I hear somebody that's like 55 or 60 years old and they're like, oh my God, the market crashed, I'm in so much trouble. I'm like, well, what were you doing with all of your money in the stock market when you're 5 years away from retirement? Like why would you expose yourself like that? So that's kind of the why behind this. And so once you've figured out your allocation, there's actually, I'm going to push pause there. Any questions?
I think Brent has a question on the chat room.
Yeah, so in the chat, I just asked, as a new trader or like opening a first brokerage account, what should we be looking for in a brokerage? I mean, I know you said they were pretty much all the same. Is that true in that sense as well?
It kind of depends on what type of trader. If you're somebody who is not really interested in if you're someone who's fascinated by the idea of researching stocks and bonds, and you're going to be trading a lot, and you might be, you might be having, outside of this conversation, you might just be interested in buying individual stocks and bonds. You're going to want a platform that offers a lot in the way of investor tools and research, right? And you're also going to want, a platform that offers you the cheapest, the cheapest price. Although I think most of them are moving to, most of them are basically free at this point. If you imagine that someday you're going to be a really sophisticated trader and you're going to be doing options and on margin, some people, I shouldn't be telling you all this, but you can have a margin account where you're borrowing money to buy stocks. Sometimes the interest rate on that margin account is really attractive. Most of the big brokers will give you great execution. They're not into the Robinhood, BS. They're going to give you great pricing. So it's really kind of just, I would, just kind of look at the reviews. If you think you can search, what's the best trading platform for a newbie, or what's the best trading platform for somebody who's going to be really rolling up their sleeve. It's kind of, I would just kind of trust the reviews, but E-Trade, Charles Schwab, Ameritrade, Scottrade, they kind of dominate this space. So that's a great question. Does that helpful, Brent? Or are you just like,
No, absolutely, yeah. So it like you said, it just depends on what kind of trader you are. I think you're going to be. Absolutely. And so use the platform based on that. Yeah, I do have one more question. I guess maybe it's too early for this, but what makes a good bond versus a bad bond? And I guess same for a stock.
Oh no, absolutely. That's it. Companies, I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard that, companies are recognized as people in the eyes of the United States laws, but there's actually S&P rating, bond ratings. So much like how human beings have credit scores that can dictate how creditworthy they are for a mortgage or an auto loan or something like that. Bonds get their own credit ratings, and and those ratings are very similar to, and they make them really simple. They do they make it like AAA is the best, and B's the worst. And so this is a bond that's backed by a company or a government that is super solvent, and odds are 0.001 that they won't pay you back, and it's a really good bond. And then you go down here to D, and that's basically a company that's on the verge of bankruptcy, and you're probably going to get 10 cents on the dollar back for your bond, and the company's firing people left and right in the industry that won't exist in 5 years, and you're never going to get your money back, right? So that's kind of the quick and dirty for bonds. For stocks, I mean, there's tens of thousands of stocks and bonds in the world, and so my whole approach, about 20 or 30 years ago, you had to go and buy a mutual fund. And a mutual fund is just a pot of money that human beings run, and whenever human beings are involved, things can get expensive. And so about 20 or 30 years ago, they invented these things called ETFs, which is basically a mutual fund that's controlled by a robot or a computer. They're super cheap. So one of the ones, which one of them we're looking at, the BND. So this Vanguard bond share ETF, it gives you exposure to the entire U.S. bond market, and its fees are 0.3. Their fees are 0.3%. So I think for every $10,000 invested, I think that's like $30 in fees. And so average mutual fund. And so remember that, like 0.3. So actively managed funds charge more. The asset, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So it looks like mutual funds are usually, that's almost 20 to 30 times more in fees. And I know it might not seem like a lot. It's only, 67 basis points. But over time, which is what we're talking about today, those fees can add up to a lot. And so ETFs are just kind of a really tidy way of like not having to worry about picking stocks to begin with. I was a ETF in my retirement account almost my entire life until the last year or two when I started to get more involved in picking individual stocks, because I always remembered, you know, that like I'm not good at picking stocks. You know, no one's actually that good. And so if no one can beat an ETF, if human beings can't beat the market consistently over time, you know, just grab an ETF. And so for the bond one, you know, once you've figured out your allocation, you know, again, if you're 40 years old, 40% bonds, 60% stock, you use 40% of the cash that you put in your account. You know, if it's $500, or I'm sorry, in this example, I use a 25-year-old, right? 25-year-old takes 25% of their $500 or 125, and they buy this BND. Where was that? You know, so this Vanguard Total Bond Fund, right? You get all the bonds in the world, and it's giving you 2% a year, and you're done. You don't even have to worry about it, right? Like it's such a stable, you know, it's such a stable performing asset over time. Just, you know, set it and forget it, right? And then on the other side of that coin, right, you use the remaining balance to buy a fund that is exposed to the stock market, right, or the equity market, not bonds. And the reason I mentioned the two Vanguard ETFs in this presentation is because Vanguard just has a reputation for having the lowest fees for these ETFs. Because when you're compounding the fees over whatever your horizon is until retirement, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 basis points, 0.5%, you know, on $100,000, that is, I think that's $500, right? And then you snowball that with interest over, you know, 40 years, and all of a sudden it's a big number. So I'm always a big fan of shopping for ETFs based, you pick a sector and then you look at the fees and try to find the cheapest one. And I'm not against, you know, if you just love the market and you love learning about companies and you want to, you know, make investments in individual stocks, you should go for that. You know, just beware, you know, buy stock in companies where you believe in them for the long run, right? Like you believe in the leadership, you believe in the product, you believe in the sustainability of the business. You know, whereas if the share price goes up or down in any given day, you know, you're not worried about it. You're like, you know, I really think GM is gonna, I'm just using this as an example, GM is just gonna really, you know, clean up, and they're gonna really be the first to bring electric vehicles to the United States, and they're gonna kill it. And I really think Mary Barra is making good decisions as the CEO, and I'm gonna buy some stock in GM. Great, buy that stock and then just don't worry about it. One of the things that this presentation really doesn't talk about a lot is the difference in some of you, if you've owned a home, well, I guess maybe that might not be super applicable, but you know, there's a big difference in your taxes if you hold an asset a year or more or less than a year. You know, the short term, an asset like a stock or a bond that's held for less than 12 months gets treated at the same rate as your ordinary income, right? You know, but if you hold an asset for a year or longer, the gains are treated at much favorable rates, sometimes as low as 10 or 15%. So whereas, you know, depending upon your tax bracket, you might be paying 30 or 40% on a gain that you hold on an asset less than a year. If you hold, the longer you hold it, as long as it's a year or more, you're going to have much more favorable tax treatment. Any questions? No? Okay, you guys are good. Okay, I made this one bright red because it is the single hardest one in the entire. This is the rubber meeting the road. This is your habits forming and changing and getting better. This is whatever you need to do to gamify, to make it fun, to have it on your shopping list to buy the app or whatever it takes, right? Especially for all of you as real estate agents that have choppy income, right? You have got to you've got to make it a habit to add money to the account. You know, if you love seeing, if like you love nothing more than seeing it built brick by brick, $100 a week or $100 a month or whatever you can afford, whatever your budget will tolerate, do that, right? If you're able to automatically fund it every 2 weeks with payday, you know, pay yourself. I'm sure you all have heard pay yourself first, right? This is where the paying yourself goes, right? This is it. I think there's this book I really like called Atomic Habits, and in the book, the guy says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so if you can just make a tiny, you know, tiny amounts, right? The power of compound interest is undefeated. You know, even if you're in your 30s or 40s, you're never, you know, or 50s, right? You're never too old to start building your own wealth. And there is nothing that builds wealth faster than owning equity in businesses. You know, it's, you know, real estate probably is up there, but like once you get to the oh, we've got some questions. I see there. What do we got? Yep. Oh, Tony was dropping in the Cleary book. Great book. So, you know, when you for most of Americans that are homeowners, their home is the single biggest driver of their net worth. Once you get to the top of the kind of the top 10% of households in the U.S., owning equity in businesses is the single biggest driver of their net worth. So I'm gonna pause, and I'm gonna actually I'd like some of you, you know, if you're feeling brave, which I'm sure real estate agents have no trouble being. Do any of you have any tips or tricks or habits that you've used in the past to help you save money that you feel comfortable sharing with everybody else?
Well, when they first come on, when they do their deep dive with me to set up their business plan, we have a thing called 8 Weeks of Greatness. It's a business foundation system. And part of it, what that does is it teaches them that they need to set up 4 different bank accounts because they've actually started their own business. And this is not something that I can do for them. This is something that they would need to do for themselves, and to teach them how to put their money into 4 different categories: the business, the savings, the operational side, and then what you have for yourself. And I hate to call her out, but Afton has been very good and consistent with that. And she was buying a house within this last year. And I just watched her succeed doing that. And that made me really proud.
Afton, are you on the call? Can you share if you're how this has been such a positive behavior and habit for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, sorry, my noise in the background, but thanks, Tony. But I mean, it helps me to look at wealth a different way. I wasn't taught how to do any of this stuff, you know. So I mean, I'm still learning. But I wasn't taught to look at money that way. So it just kind of opened my mind a little bit more. And because I have kids, I want to be able to have something more for them, you know, just kind of what I was taught. So I'm trying to challenge myself to kind of open my mind up a little bit more and to start small. I guess like it's okay to just start small, start where you are, and then keep going from there.
That's so cool. You know, it is, you know, getting rich. It is the only 2 ways to get rich quick are to come out of the right mom or to win the lottery. Everything else it takes about 10 to 15 years. So, you know, once you kind of resign yourself that there's no such thing as getting rich quick, then you're willing to like make that journey, the $5 a week journey or $5 a day or whatever it is, right? Whatever you need to do to like develop just one step at a time, you know. One time I read that, you know, you become a millionaire $10 at a time. And there's no logic to that quote at all, except it like stuck in my brain. And I'm like, yeah, $10 a time at a time. It's silly, but it works, right? And so that's kind of the point of this page, is whatever system you need, whatever it takes. If it's 4 separate bank accounts, if it's an automatic savings app, if it's a reminder with your grocery bill, or however you get there, and don't sweat, if it's $5 a week or $5 a month or $5 a day or whatever it is, you're doing something. And the thing that really, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was at a presentation and I heard a statistic that just made my jaw drop. And it was from the Federal Reserve, and they said that 47% of US adults couldn't write a check for $500 that would clear their checking account. And I was just like, pardon my French, holy shit, like half of the country can't write a check for $500. And I was just totally floored. And there's a lot behind that. There's a lot of things that America needs to do better that are behind that. But if you can do this, if a year from now you've got an extra $500, it means you can, that's if you need a new cell phone, or you need a new set of tires, or if life throws the curveball at you, you can weather it, and it's not gonna knock you out, right? And that's what the thing about that statistic that is just makes me so concerned, is that it means that there's just so many fragile households in America.
That's kind of where we were. So I mean, we still like have times where we mess up, but like that helps, you know what I mean? Like just kind of changing the mindset of like money is the vehicle and not necessarily like it dictates everything. You have to make your money do what you want it to do. So that kind of helped a little bit, because like I said, you would not necessarily taught that, or if you taught that, you're not shown that. I'll say it like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's maddening, because money, people have like a really complex relationship with money, and we don't, as a society, we don't really do a good job of helping people understand it, and we don't do a good job of helping people have a healthy relationship with it. And the cynical side of me says that that's because it makes it a lot easier to take from you. If you don't have a healthy relationship with it, and you don't understand it, then it's easier for them to take it from us. And so I don't have a magic wand. I'm not gonna, I can't make politicians see the mess that they've created, but I can help. If I can, if people can have a better relationship with money and understand it a little better, then that at least there's something that we can do. So to help ourselves, not to get, too deep, or, so come up with your own process that you can stick with, and don't, it's just like the same parts of our brain that deal with like our diet and our physical health. That's the same part of the software that you deal with your money, right? And so if you miss a week or two or whatever, don't get mad at yourself. Just always be proud about the work you've done to squirrel away that nest egg, whatever it is. Don't beat yourself up. If you miss or if you got to take some money out for something important, this is part of, don't put too much pressure on yourself. It's just money, just a tool. This is focused on building your wealth in the long run, right? So that you can have that legacy to leave your kids. You don't have to worry about, paying for healthcare when you're old. You can enjoy your life in a way, you can have that independence that comes with being financially secure. And then, really, really important, ignore the news. Don't listen to all the guys screaming and pounding on bells and whatever Jim Cramer does to sell commercials. The best investor in history was a guy from Omaha, Nebraska named Warren Buffett, and he always said, his first rule of investing is you should be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. And so I think all of you know that as you sell homes for a living, the best time to buy we're all in Detroit, right? And if you can remember what Detroit's real estate market was like in 2009, 2010, people were scared, out of their mind, which meant it was the single best time in the history of Detroit real estate to buy homes, right? And it's the same thing with the stock market, right? Just because everyone is buying Dogecoin or Ethereum and they're really excited about it, right? If everyone's excited about buying an investment, that should send up a little red flag in the back of your mind or the hairs on the back of your neck and say, okay, everyone's being really greedy. This is a problem, right? And conversely, if you start to set aside some cash or some wealth, right? I'll tell you at the end of this presentation, I think the US stock market is incredibly overvalued right now. I think it's really priced really high. I think now is probably not the world's best time to get into, or the housing market for that matter. US housing and stock markets are by historical measures are incredibly expensive right now. And I'm sure all of you, probably experienced that to some degree with your work, at least on the housing side. So, I think there's a lot of greed in the markets right now. And so I don't think it's a good time necessarily to be buying a ton of stock, but that's me. That's just one person's opinion. So, and next, and don't check your account balance too often, right? Just every time you're putting new money in, you buy some extra shares of the bond or the stock ETF that you like. And, don't worry about the green signs going up or the red signs going down. It's really, really easy to keep score, right? But this wealth that you're building, it's not for today you, it's for tomorrow you. And so if you trust the plan and you trust the process, don't get bent out of shape if the market's going up or down. You have a plan, and it's gonna work. This is about as time tested as it gets, and you're just gonna be patient. And it's tempting. There's a lot of people that are using apps like Robinhood or they're buying cryptocurrency, and there's so much volatility, right, in what they're doing. They're buying and trading stocks and crypto, and they're it's almost like somebody that goes to the casino a lot. And talk to people that go to the casino. Most people that go to the casino that a lot, they seem to always remember the times they won a lot more than the times they lost. And and I've seen research that shows that day traders, only about 3 to 10% of day traders consistently beat the market, which means most people would be better off just putting their money in an ETF and forgetting about it. But that's not as much fun, and that's not as glamorous as buying Dogecoin and whatever the hot new cryptocurrency is. So that's why the presentation is get rich slowly, not get rich quickly. And then around your birthday each year, set a reminder to check in on your portfolio, right? As stock prices go up or down, your balance, that ratio, the golden ratio will have changed. And then you just buy or sell some of the stock fund or the bond fund to kind of make sure it kind of catches back up to whatever that ratio is for you, right? If you're 35, if you turn 35, you're going to rebalance, sell some of the shares so you can get back to that 35-65, does that math work? Yep, 35-65 ratio of bonds to stocks. So you're always gently rebalancing once a year on your birthday. Any questions? Oh, I can't point at anybody. Okay. And then step 10, this is me when that big face, little aging thing was all the rage a while ago. We're all prisoners of the moment, and it's really easy to, we all do a really bad job of thinking about ourselves in the future. And so I like to every once in a while have a check-in with, like, I'm 40 and I'll have a check-in with 50 or 60-year-old Matt, and I'll ask 50 or 60-year-old Matt what he wants me to do and to avoid living destitute or in the poorhouse or alone or whatever I'm worried about for 50 or 60-year-old Matt doing, or he's worried about me doing. And so when you start down this process, right, it's easy to say, well, you know, I'm 40 years old and I shouldn't do it because it's too late, right? But if you had a conversation with 60-year-old you, and 60-year-old you would grab you by the collar and say, it's not too late. Please start. If you start today, I'm going to have an extra 50 grand when I'm your age, when you're my age, right? And so it sounds silly, but I found it's really valuable exercise because you have to create empathy for your future self, plain and simple. Otherwise, this is just a really hard process to do. So once you've started that process, let your future self think your today self. But wait, there's more. But before we get into the more, I want to give all of you a chance to ask any other questions you might have about this process. No, okay, great. So I want to talk a little bit about cryptocurrency because I think it is just a really fascinating area, and I want to talk to you a little bit about spotting the market. But before I do that, as Tony mentioned, I would love, you know, I've been doing my YouTube channel for, oh, we got a question, I think. Oh, no, that's just Tony sharing. So please, 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 I've been doing this for a couple months. I've already got about 15,000 views. This is a passion project for me, but the more subscribers I get, I can actually make it sustainable versus right now I'm just making videos out of my own pocket, which is very expensive. But so please take a minute, grab your phone, click subscribe. If I can get to 1,000 subscribers, I can actually start making a buck and hopefully sustaining the content and watch it. And if you like it, if it's valuable, you know, tell me what you like, what you don't like. It's so much fun. I really have enjoyed the process. So please, please, please do that. And Tony will bug you. I'll track you down. So what's the deal with cryptocurrency? So there are some people, there is a debate. Some people say it's a fad. Some people say they don't get it. You know, you're just speculating. You're going to lose your money, right? And then there's the other side, the other camp where people are like, this is transformational. It's this amazing invention. You're missing out if you're not doing it. You know, fortunes will be made, right? And so, what's the truth? And what I really like you to kind of take. Well, first off, for those of you that don't know, I mean, it's you know, no one knows who made Bitcoin. You know, it could have been a country, it could have been a person, it could have been people, it could have been a company. No one really knows. But it's this really simple. It's this incredibly simple concept where the work in order to mine or unearth the Bitcoins, the work that you have to do with your computer is to anonymously verify the transactions that are taking place. That's the blockchain. And so what you're basically saying is if you want more of the gold in the hill, you have to spend time confirming all of the ledger, right? And so what that does is it creates a decentralized medium of exchange that brings trust to a totally trustless environment. So people around the world, and there's nothing any government can do to stop it. And there's a finite number of Bitcoins. So unlike governments that just print all the money they wish, and that's just really paper that they're printing that people believe in, there's only, I think, 21 million Bitcoins or something like that. So it's absolutely brilliant. I think it's one of the most interesting things that's happened in the business world in the last 30 years. It has a pretty notorious past because who are people that want to remain anonymous with their transactions? Well, it's people selling and buying things that they don't want, that they're not proud of, right? Like, you can imagine. I'll let your imaginations run wild, right? But aside from being, you know, a thing that people use to trade illicit things, it's starting to replace gold. And what I mean, I'm not talking about gold in jewelry or industrial applications, but for a very long time, people would look at their investment portfolio and they'd say, you know, throw 10% of your money in gold because gold is a commodity. It's always worth something, and it will be a hedge against inflation or economic downturn. And now, you know, in 2021, people are starting to look at gold and saying, that's old. Put 5% of your portfolio in Bitcoin, you know, and so that is why Bitcoin crossed over $50,000 a coin today. Or, you know, it is crazy. It is super, super hot, right? But over here on the left-hand side, it's important to point out, you know, it's not really regulated. It's not really easy to invest in, and it's not really a currency. It is, what I mean by that is we look at Bitcoin and we say, oh my gosh, Bitcoin's $50,000, right? But I don't like look at I don't go to the T-Mobile store and I say, I'll give you 1/10 of a Bitcoin for a new phone, right? We're not using it to measure things. We're using it as a store of value. Some people are using it to exchange things, you know, as I mentioned, maybe in like a black market or something like that. But you know, we're not using it to buy stuff. We still use our credit cards and cash. So I think Bitcoin has a long way to go to conquer the world. It's not to say it might not get there. And so if you do decide you want to invest in it as part of, you know, once you've kind of done all the other, you know, you don't have a ton of credit card debt and you're, you know, in a good place financially, you know, I think there's a lot of cryptocurrency, there's a lot of wannabes. And so when you look at this chart, which hopefully all of you can read, right? So Bitcoin has a market cap of almost $1 trillion. That means that all of the Bitcoins in the world are worth almost $1 trillion, which is more than 5 times as much as the closest competitor, which is Ethereum. And so, you know, my point is that I think, you know, putting your money into Bitcoin is probably a pretty good idea, but any of these other ones are kind of also rans. I just don't really know, you know, like, I don't really know what their future holds, right? Like the Bitcoin is just totally conquering this market. And I don't really know what happens to the rest of these. So again, one person's opinion and just food for thought. If you do want to invest in Bitcoin, you can open up a Coinbase account, coinbase.com. It's not the most beautiful platform in the world, but it's pretty secure, and I think it's probably the #1 choice for most people. Or you can actually use your brokerage account, and there's a fund, an ETF kind of called Grayscale, the Grayscale Trust, which I think its ticker is BTC, GBTC. And so you can buy this, and this security, which is, you know, it tries to mimic the rise and fall of Bitcoin. And so you do pay a premium for that. You usually Grayscale costs about 20% more than going to Coinbase, because Bitcoin trades 24 hours a day and the markets are only open 8. So it's really hard for a security to truly mimic Bitcoin. So they have to charge you a lot more to kind of get there. So, you know, yep.
So I know you can't necessarily like give advice, but do you think that it's smart to just kind of like be involved with all of it, like have bonds, have stocks, and maybe look at Bitcoin, or it just depends on you, like the individual person?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a fan of Bitcoin. I think, you know, if your net worth is $10,000, I think having $500 in Bitcoin is not a bad idea. You know, it's not a, you know, and I'm gonna, you know, like roughly $500, right? You know, it's enough money where you won't feel bad if it triples in value, but it's not too much where if it goes down 50%, you're not crying, right? So, you know, I think having a little bit of your net worth in Bitcoin is the way the world is moving before our eyes. And that's why the price has gone up from, I think it's doubled in the last month, you know. That doesn't mean it's going to keep doubling. That just means it's doubled in the last month. And there's a lot of people starting to treat it as a piece of their portfolio. Okay. So I said about 20 minutes ago that we're in a really, really, really hot market. And so this graph, I know, you know, I don't know how much, this graph is the total value of all stocks in the United States divided by the gross domestic product of the United States. So it's basically the value of all stock divided by the value of our economic output. And so in a perfect world, it would always be around a 1-to-1 ratio, but it's not. And as you can tell, like, do you guys see my mouse pointer right now? No? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
okay. Cool. Okay, so right here is right here is the tech bubble bursting, for those of you that are old enough to remember, right? This is when the tech stocks got really, really expensive, and then the stock market crashed, right? Here's the housing bubble, right? Here's the housing bubble, and then the market crashed, and then it came back up, right? And this graph doesn't go to, I'm sorry, I didn't grab the right chart, but right now, let's go find out. I don't want to leave you in suspense, but the US marked US GDP. So when you look at it again from a historical perspective, that's not it. Sorry, the stock market is incredibly expensive. And this measure, here we go. Beware the bubble. The U.S. stock market capitalization rate to GDP ratio. So this is, here it is. There we go. See, 2020, we're at almost 1.8. The stock market is really, really, really hot. It's worth almost 2 times the US economy right now. The stock market can be stupid a lot longer than you can afford to bet against it. And so I'm not suggesting you all go run out and do something crazy. I'm just telling you that much like how, and it's the same thing, like here's the other one. This is the Shiller. Some of you might have heard of Robert Shiller. He was a really famous investor, and he came up with a Case-Shiller real estate index, which we can even look at that, and it will see how hot the housing market is. Right, let's see. Look at that. The housing prices have exceeded the peak of 2008, according to the Case-Shiller index. All assets in the United States are really, really, really expensive, right? This is the Shiller price to earnings ratio for the market, right? It's here's what's this? Oh, that's the beginning of the Great Depression, right? Yeah, 90 years ago, right? Here's the tech market bubble, and here's that looks like the housing bubble. So there are some all these measures are leading us to conclude that right now. Then this is because there's so much. Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the biggest culprit that people blame for the hot stock and housing market is all of the money, all the stimulus money, kind of moving its way around the economy. And so I'm just telling you, I'm just reporting the news. You can take it for what it's worth, right? So that is the extent of the presentation. Again, I really appreciate all of you taking a minute to just subscribe to my channel, so I can hopefully turn it into a really cool little personal finance learning community. And we've got a few minutes, and so if any of you have any questions or anything that anything you have on your mind, I'm happy to do my best to answer it for you.
I just want to thank you for the gems. You definitely gained a follower in me, man. I'm a baby in the game. One of my friends sent the link, man, and I'm glad that I followed the link. Appreciate you.
It means a lot, Jay. I love doing this stuff. It's a lot of fun. Anything I can do, it's I could talk about this stuff for hours. So I'm happy you guys found some value in it.
When it comes to building your portfolio of stocks and bonds, is there a general, well, what's your advice or opinion on a general percentage of where you would allocate things as far as tech, healthcare, oil, media, things?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brian. And there's kind of two categories. There's growth and there's value. And growth is, technology, healthcare, life sciences, cannabis, companies that are changing the world, Uber Eats, Moderna, Google, Facebook, Netflix, blah, 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 right? And then there's value, and value stocks are like oil companies and real estate companies and cruise lines and airlines and hotel operators and stuff like that, right? And it's a really weird moment, because when you look at the market, what I just showed you, the growth stocks are, the value stocks, like the oil companies and hotel and airlines, they're all pretty fairly valued. What gets really crazy is all of these companies, like the electric vehicle supplier, or the cannabis company, or the online home insurance company, and their price, Airbnb's stock, Airbnb is worth 50 times more than the company's sales, right? And so imagine if Tony's gross at a year was $1 million, but her company was worth 50 million, right? It's just the valuation on the growth stocks. Tesla, there's no one on planet Earth thinks Tesla is worth what it's worth today, because Tesla bends metal and buys glass and rubber, and they put cars together. And and Tesla is worth more than every single car maker on planet Earth, even though they make a fraction of the cars that one assembly plant in Ohio makes for Ford. Like, all of the growth stocks act like the future already happened. And so I would be more nervous if you told me you were taking your entire 401k and putting it in Tesla and Airbnb than I would be if you said you were putting it in Hilton and Exxon Mobil. And the reason I'd say that is, I'm like, I feel Exxon Mobil and Hilton are cheaper relative to their earnings and cash flows than Airbnb and Uber and Tesla. I'm not saying, no one knows what the future holds, but I would be, the valuations on these growth stocks right now is just out of control. All right, I see one more question in the chat. How do you feel about 401k? Should I be maxing out my contributions or feeding my Robinhood? That's a great question. If you have an employer that offers a 401k or a 403b or any other retirement plan, if they offer a match, you should take advantage of it. If they're giving you free money, you should, whatever you do to max it out, to get that, whatever you need to do to max that match, if you can do it within your budget constraints, you should go for it. The other value of an IRA or a 401k is that you're saving money on taxes today. And so if you think you're going to have a really good year, if let's say you're like, oh, I'm going to make $100,000 this year, right? And so you're going to be in a really high tax bracket, and I don't know what the tax bracket is for 100 grand. Let's just say it's 30%. So your contributions to that 401k account aren't taxed, and they'll reduce your taxable income for the year. And so you're basically saving, if you're in the 30% tax bracket, you're saving 30 cents on the dollar for every dollar you put into that IRA or to that 401k. And so if you or your spouse or partner, however you file your taxes, if you're starting to get into really high tax brackets, IRAs and 401ks can help you defer taxes until you're old, which I would rather, pay taxes 30 years from now than today. So that is a very good question as well. I know a little bit less about the inner workings of self-directed, so Roths are everything I just told you about a 401k. A Roth is the opposite. And so what I mean by that is, you don't save money on taxes on a Roth today. I pay my taxes. I have $1,000 after all my payroll taxes and everything's been taken out. And I take that $1,000 and I put it in a Roth and I buy, 10 shares of Airbnb. Well, here's the beauty of a Roth. So 25 years from now, when I'm eligible to start taking distributions from that Roth, the 10 grand I put in Airbnb, it could be worth literally $10 million. It could have appreciated $10 million, and I won't pay a dime of taxes on the withdrawals. So when I'm 65 and I start taking that money out, this is how much money I pay on the distribution from a Roth, right? So it makes it sound like they're super sexy, and they are, but they're really, Roths, they start to have income limitations and they start to phase out. And if you can put, Roth is always a good place to start. The right answer is probably a little bit of both. You know, if you can kind of put some money in your IRA or your 401k, you can put some money in your Roth if you're eligible, because again, there's a lot of eligibility issues with Roths. You should try to do a little bit of both. So you got, you know, just like how Tony coaches you all to have your four different bank accounts. I think having, you know, a Roth, an IRA, and then maybe your own brokerage account. There's no wrong answer to having different pots of money to build. Awesome. Any other questions from the team at Abode? Cool. Well, it was an honor. It was an honor being with all of you today, and I really appreciate your time, and hopefully you got something good out of it.
Thanks, Matt. So I just let everyone know that the YouTube channel has been, I'm going to copy it and put it back in the chat.
I just subscribed to it. Thank you.
Okay, great. I mean, he gives it, you know, he's phenomenal, and it's straight, no chaser. There's no, you know, ambiguities. He's not trying to prop himself up. I know he wants to actually get more followers, but he's giving you all the information that you need, and it's transparent. So, you know, take advantage of this opportunity, especially if you can support him and he's supporting you with the information. So, but thanks again for joining us, Matthew. A recording of this will be added to your Trello boards for those of you who have Trello boards. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. All right. Have a good one.
Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you.